To witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back to another live stream for Warrior Creed with the radical Maajid Nawaz and my brother, as always, the infamous Usman Raja. And today, on this Boxing Day 2023, as you can see, Usman, I'm back in Tennessee, the regular family ritual of coming here to visit my in-laws, hence the background being different to what you're usually used to. But I try to make it as consistent as possible for you, bro, because I know you're missing me, by keeping the black jumper as usual. But today, because of the time, the period, and what we're in, Boxing Day 2023, what we thought we'd do is talk a bit about what Christmas has been like for Palestinians, especially in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, Yeshua, to use his ancient name, Yeshua, the Isa alayhi salam in Arabic, Jesus, because there has been some developments, of course, by Palestinian Christians who took the initiative to cancel Christmas this year for the first time in history. That, I think, hasn't received, for obvious reasons, Usman, that you'll understand, hasn't received the attention in corporatist media that it deserves. To cancel Christmas in Jesus' Isa alayhi salam's birthplace for the first time in history, a decision made, I emphasize, by Palestinian Christians, not by Muslims in the West Bank, but by Palestinian Christians. They took that decision because they're Palestinian and they're mourning the suffering and the displacement, the ethnic cleansing, the death and destruction that they have been facing, in solidarity with their brethren in Gaza, where there are also Palestinian Christians, but obviously far fewer in Gaza. But the Palestinian Christians in the West Bank have decided to take this action. Now, this a live stream, the image that we want to start with by just showing you all is this. This is an iconic image from, it's an effigy from Bethlehem, where instead of holding Christmas celebrations as usual, the Palestinian Christians have placed this here and as a way of showing the world that they are in mourning. This is obviously a doll, there you can see, lying in rubble, draped in the Palestinian flag, making a prayer gesture, a Christian prayer gesture. The Times has decided to address this story, which is interesting, but it was only in the foreign news section. As I say, I don't believe the story got as much attention as it deserved, but you can see there from the Times of London, the headline, Christmas cancelled in Bethlehem as town mourns. Christ's birthplace is usually full of foreign visitors for the festive season, but public celebrations were called off in solidarity with those suffering in Gaza. This is the subheading there. And of course, you can see the date there, Christmas Day, Monday, December the 25th, 2023, an article from Bethlehem written by Catherine Phillip. It is, it's incredibly tragic. Now, what we are going to do is show some of the background to the events leading up to this decision that the Palestinian Christians made for themselves in solidarity with their fellow Palestinians of all backgrounds and in protest at Netanyahu's war, and then come to the sermon provided by one of the priests in Palestine who addressed the world. And it's an incredibly moving sermon, and we're going to play it for you, 5 minutes of it at least. And it's him addressing the world, but in distress, I must say, addressing the world and the world's hypocrisy over what's going on in Gaza. But before we get to that sermon, which is a Christmas Day sermon, which would probably be more beneficial for people to hear than Stephen Fry's alternative Christmas message. Certainly more relevant, certainly more from the heart of the conflict. Relevant because it's from the birthplace of Jesus, alayhi salam, Isa, and therefore also from the heart of the conflict. You know, that's something which we wish as an alternative Christmas message our corporatist television channels played instead of Stephen Fry's lamentation, which, you know, with respect to him, was not really a holistic view or approach to this subject matter. But nevertheless, we're going to play it here for you on Warrior Creed, and those of you who are on the podcast via Radical Media, it's okay. You will understand it too because the speech is in English. But some of the background to this to Christmas being cancelled in Bethlehem is, if you remember, Usman, a couple of episodes back, a couple of live streams back, we suggested that our viewers and listeners should pay attention and pay heed to a developing story being raised by one Layla Moran in the British Parliament. She is a half Palestinian, but you know, that's all we've got so far in the British Parliament, with literally the only member of Parliament with any connection, ethnic connection to the land there is Layla. She's a Liberal Democrat member of Parliament, my former party, and is half Palestinian. I know Layla. I've known her from the old days before I stood as a Liberal Democrat candidate in 2015. I was in their ethnic minority leadership program to promote diversity in politics, and Layla was one of my colleagues there. I've known her from before she was a member of Parliament. You know, I'd say we're friends. She, a couple of weeks back on the live stream, we suggested everyone pay attention to what she was doing. She was consistently raising this issue of the demand for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire in Parliament. And then this happened, and Layla jumped on this. Of course, naturally she would, because her Palestinian side is Christian. And so she was, of course, natural for her to pay attention to this story. And the story was when, if you remember recently, the church in Gaza was besieged by Israeli forces. And there you see Sky News reporting on it. And it states there in the post by a user on Twitter, Saul Staniforth, states there in the text of the post, a Palestinian woman leaving a church shelter to go to the toilet was shot dead by an Israeli sniper. And her daughter, who went to help her, was killed as well. UK government minister Lee Rowley is asked about this and says Israel has a right to defend itself against murderers. So that's what happened. It was an unfolding story. Some of you may have seen it in the media. There was a church in Gaza that was besieged, and the IDF were not allowing anybody to exit this church. And a woman, one presumes a Palestinian Christian woman, but who knows? She was Palestinian at least. She left the church because, of course, anyone's allowed to take sanctuary in a church, but she left the church to go to relieve herself to the bathroom, and a sniper killed her. And a child came out distraught, of course, after her mother. And according to this post, the child was killed too. This led to what Layla was saying in Parliament developing into a breaking story. Sky News was paying attention to the church incident, at least. Now, of course, if you remember on Warrior Creed a couple of weeks ago, when we raised this and said, watch out for this story that Layla's raising, it developed into this. At the time, and you can go back to, I think, 2 weeks ago, Radical Media, it's there in writing as well, on maajidnawaz.substack.com. We said that it is tragic that it probably would take the killing of Palestinian Christians for the world to start paying attention to this, because, of course, we approach this from a human perspective. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're human and you're being killed in this way from the skies, it breaks our heart. But that's exactly what happened. The killing of Christians in Gaza, though they are a tiny minority, they are still there, managed to attract the attention of many. And many began questioning, perhaps who hadn't previously, what on earth was going on there. But this story led to Layla meeting with Hisham Zomlot, who's the Palestinian representative to the United Kingdom. Now, I've met Hisham Zomlot when I went to the West Bank as part of the Liberal Democrat delegation back in the old days, before my unsuccessful parliamentary run, and then, of course, my resignation, unilateral resignation from the Lib Dems over the Uyghur Muslim affair. I met Hisham Zomlot in Ramallah. Hisham struck me back then as a very articulate voice for the Palestinians in the West Bank, representing Fatah. Of course, there are many factions. His faction was the Palestinian Authority's Fatah-run Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And he struck me then as a very articulate voice and somebody who cared deeply, of course, about the plight of the future Palestinian state. So here is a post of Layla then meeting with Hisham Zomlot online. She states, first of all, before we get to that, sorry, this is Layla stating, this is the haunting voice of the daughter of one of my cousins in the church. Tanks are still outside. They're down to almost no provisions. It's posted by Layla Moran on Twitter. She says, I've been told that food and water was delivered by the IDF, but no sign of it yet. When will this nightmare end? Now, Layla posted an audio of the besieged church as well. Before we get to that audio, here's the promised post of Layla meeting Hisham Zomlot. Hisham Zomlot posted it himself. He said, Israel's aggression on Gaza has affected several British citizens with relatives in Palestine. Many have already had to mourn their loved ones. Today, I met Layla Moran MP, whose relatives are besieged at the Holy Family Church in Gaza. On Saturday, a mother and her daughter were killed. So Hisham Zomlot, the Palestinian representative to the UK, picked up the story. You see there, he met with Layla. And then, as you just saw, Layla then posted, we'll put that up again for you, just in the right order. Layla says, this is the haunting voice of the daughter of one of my cousins in the church. This is Layla's relative who was holed up in that church where the sniper killed the mother who tried to leave to go to the bathroom. We're going to now play you the audio. It's very sad. It's in English as well, so you should be able to understand, no problem. And this is a voice of a Palestinian Christian, Layla Moran's relative, the daughter of her cousin, in this church.
I will put you in the picture of what's happening. I was able to talk to mom just right now. One of the numbers in her room was okay, and I was able to talk to her. She said we are locked in, we cannot go out, and she has nothing to eat for tonight, even only can of corn. And she told me no bread, nothing. I didn't ask about the water, I forgot. But she said we take care if we want to go to the bathroom because all snipers around. And they still at the gate of the church, the tanks. But I am worried about the food. This is the only thing. That's why I said I will send you a message to show them how, if people didn't die from their muscles, they will die from hunger.
Now, that's the haunting voice of a woman holed up in a church in Gaza, Palestinian Christian woman. At this stage, before we carry on, I just want to urge everybody this holiday season that, of course, I'm here in Tennessee with my relatives who are Christian, practicing. And my wife is a Christian, raised Christian Catholic, American, part Italian, part Irish. And it's important at this moment for us to remember that that's what people, Christians in Palestine, are going through. They are holed up in their churches at risk of being sniped, murdered if they leave to go to the bathroom, as has happened already. And a young child following her mother was then reportedly killed too. It is a tragic, tragic situation. And it's important for us to remember that. You know, I'm not saying everybody else around the world has to cancel their Christmas. What I'm saying is this is the backdrop to why Christmas, for the first time in history, I can't underline that enough. For the first time in history, Christmas in Isa alayhi salam's birthplace of Bethlehem, has been cancelled. This is the background as to why. And it's, of course, very tragic. It's moved British historian William Dalrymple significantly. He intervened on the topic with the following. The UK Tory government has completely lost any moral compass it ever had. How could a sniper shooting Catholic civilians within a church possibly be justified as legitimate self-defense against Islamist militants. The simple truth is that Rishi Sunak and his government are racist and Islamophobic bigots who regard all Palestinians as subhumans whose lives are utterly expendable. It is also true that this is a government run by a bunch of ignorant bankers with zero understanding of history, geography, or any politics beyond constituency fundraising. It's important to mention that William Dalrymple is a historian. Alleging that this government has no understanding of history is something that he clearly has a right to do as a historian. He's a very well-recognized, prominent British historian and author. And it's heartwarming that he's lending his voice to the plight of the Palestinians at this moment. He didn't only just start speaking when this church incident emerged, but has continued to speak laudably throughout this entire incident. Now, that's the backdrop to how we began today, and that's with this Times headline: "Christmas is being cancelled in Bethlehem as towns as the town mourns," and that's an article from the Times of London on Christmas Day. And now we're just going to show you two reports. One is the Sky News report that we mentioned that William Dalrymple there is responding to because, of course, they reported on this story as we've just mentioned. We'll show you the Sky News report, which features the priest that ends up, that we're going to show you in the next video, giving this speech to the world on Christmas from Bethlehem. And so first, let's actually just show you the Sky News report. The father's name, by the way, that's in this, Reverend Dr. Muntha Isaac. His speech is coming up next. We'll show you these clips back to back and show you what's happening as a result of this. But before we do again, the lady in the church you heard there said that they're worried people are going to die from hunger. And that's one of the issues here, that not only are people being killed, now according to latest figures, and of course, these figures provided by the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health, but usually in every historic context, have been verified as accurate post-conflict. So you hear some people on the media stating, how can you use Hamas figures? Well, the reason is because if they were false, then they would have been false in all previous conflicts involving Gaza and Israel. But the Ministry of Health in Gaza has, and you can go back and check this, usually provided accurate casualty figures. Even if 20,000, which is currently the figures they're providing, 20,000 dead in Gaza, even if that's not accurate, what is 15,000? I mean, I'd say to you 10,000, even if it's half the number that the Gaza Health Ministry is suggesting are the numbers of lives lost in Gaza. Keep in mind, 50% of those will always be children, because 50% of the population of Gaza is children. But even if half of that number is accurate, 10,000 is when you look at international law and the responsibility for proportionality in response to any attack, then is 10,000 even, which is half of what Gaza's health ministry is quoting, proportionate to the 1,400 loss reported by the Israelis from October the 7th. And that's the answers there obvious. It's a rhetorical question. It's obviously disproportionate, obviously. And that 1,400 figure from Israel on October the 7th is the figure they revised downwards because they initially had inflated their figures. And then out of those 1,400, once they released the list of those who had died, many of them were in fact Israeli military serving officers and soldiers and members of the IDF. So it is certainly not proportionate to take that figure and look at the 20,000 reported from the Gazan Health Ministry, even if you were to, in skepticism, reduce that number by 50%. It's still not proportionate. But in addition to the tragic killing, a new tragedy is emerging. And you heard that from the church there, the lady reporting from the church saying it herself, that there's a concern that this is going to lead to a famine. Now, the Spectator has also reported this. The Spectator Index said, breaking, World Health Organization chief says famine is looming in Gaza and that many are going entire days and nights without eating. Now, some of you, again, if you're, as I am, skeptical of the World Health Organization and their role in particular, in their role in COVID, then as always, you look for corroborating evidence. And there's no greater corroborating evidence to the looming famine in Gaza, in addition to the woman that you just heard there from the church who's besieged and locked up in a church saying, we're going to starve to death if they don't shoot us. There's no greater corroborating evidence than the abysmal, heartbreaking image of children collecting flour from the rubble, from the ground in hunger. So have a look at this.
الناس بتلم مدفعين على الأرض إنه ما فيش أصلا مدفعين.
For those of you listening on the podcast via Radical Media on maajidnawaz.substack.com, that was a video imaging of Palestinian children collecting spilled flour from the dirt on the ground, using their hands to scoop it up in bags. That's the plight of the Gazans this Christmas. And again, all of this is the background to how we began as to why Christmas was cancelled in Isa alayhi salam, or Yeshua, Jesus' birthplace of Bethlehem. It's an incredibly sad situation to witness unfold before our eyes. Those of you who, again, on the podcast, want to view that video will be included in the write-up for this live stream. And all of you, if you're listening to the podcast, would of course be subscribers to Radical Media on maajidnawaz.substack.com, and you can play the video there while you're listening to this podcast or afterwards. This is the background to Christmas being cancelled. And here is the Sky News report on that very subject.
The main road.
Throughout the long and deadly history of Israel's wars with
The main road into Bethlehem is closed. What is normally a simple 20-minute journey from Jerusalem now takes over an hour as cars queue to get through the one Israeli military checkpoint that is open further south. It's been like this since the war began, and it's just one way that life in the West Bank has become much harder for Palestinians. In Manger Square, the shops selling Christmas decorations and souvenirs are mostly closed. This shop has been owned by 3 generations of the Tabash family since 1927. They haven't done any business for months, and even during COVID say it was never as bad as it is now.
We are almost 2 months without any business. We open every day because this place is part of our heart, part of our history. So we come here, me, my father, my brother, to greet the people, to stay, to drink coffee, because really this place is part of our heart.
The Church of the Nativity, normally heaving with tourists and pilgrims, is quiet, even during a Sunday Mass in December. A few Palestinian Christians attend the weekly service and pray in the grotto where Jesus is said to have been born, but the excitement and joy of Christmas is absent this year. For the Christian world, there is nowhere more synonymous with the Christmas period than Bethlehem. But this year, out of protest of the Israeli actions in Gaza and in solidarity with Palestinians, there will be no celebrations in Bethlehem. For the first time in living memory, there will be no Christmas tree in Manger Square. A few hundred meters away through the market and up the hill is the Church of Lutheran Christmas. Inside, they have made a crib of rubble and laid in it a baby wrapped in the black and white Palestinian kafir, an image that has gone around the world as a sign of the suffering in Gaza this Christmas.
The world is celebrating Christmas right now in different ways, with joyful celebrations, lighting of Christmas trees, celebrations and events. But in the hometown of Christmas, this is what Christmas looks like. Children being pulled from under the rubble, displaced families, destroyed homes. And so we hope that the world pays attention to the plight of the Palestinians, to our suffering, and for the need and the urgent need for justice in this land, and the very urgent need of a ceasefire.
The Holy Land is a place of hope and miracles for many, and they'll be praying for a ceasefire here this Christmas. But amid the echoes of Gaza, the sounds of war and the images of death, peace feels a long way away.
And you saw at the end of that clip was the Reverend, Dr. Reverend Munta Isaac. He is the priest who gave the Christmas sermon in Bethlehem from the pulpit in his church, talking about why they've cancelled Christmas and addressing the world. And now we're going to play you a 5-minute extract from that piece. It's in 2 parts, Osman, because of course, when we upload these clips, there's a maximum length allowed. Apologies for some of the response time on this as well. It's because I'm remote, but here is the speech of Reverend Dr. Munta Isaac from Bethlehem on Christmas Day, addressing the world.
Christ under the rubble. We are angry. We are broken. This should have been a time of joy. Instead, we are mourning. We are fearful. More than 20,000 killed. Thousands are still under the rubble. Close to 9,000 children killed in the most brutal ways. Day after day, 1.9 million displaced, hundreds of thousands of homes destroyed. Gaza, as we know it, no longer exists. This is an annihilation. This is a genocide. The world is watching. Churches are watching. The people of Gaza are sending live images of their own execution. Maybe the world cares, but it goes on. We are asking here, could this be our fate in Bethlehem, in Ramallah, in Jenin? Is this our destiny too? We are tormented by the silence of the world. Leaders of the so-called free lined up one after the other to give the green light for this genocide against a captive population. They gave the cover. Not only did they make sure to pay the bill in advance, they veiled the truth and context, providing the political cover. This war has confirmed to us that the world does not see us as equal. Maybe it's the color of our skins. Maybe it is because we are on the wrong side of a political equation. Even our kingship in Christ did not shield us. So they say, if it takes killing 100 Palestinians to get a single Hamas militant, then so be it. We are not humans in their eyes. But in God's eyes, no one can tell us that. The hypocrisy and racism of the Western world is transparent and appalling. They always take the word of Palestinians with suspicion and qualification. No, we're not treated equally. Yet on the other side, despite a clear track record of misinformation, lies, their words are almost always deemed infallible. To our European friends, I never ever want to hear you lecture us on human rights or international law again. And I mean this. We are not white, I guess. It does not apply to us according to your own logic. In this war, the many Christians in the Western world made sure the empire has the theology needed. It is thus self-defense, we were told. And I continue to ask, how is the killing of 9,000 children self-defense? How is the displacement of 1.9 million Palestinians self-defense? In the shadow of the empire, they turned the colonizer into the victim and the colonized into the aggressor. Have we forgotten that the state they talked to, that state was built on the ruins of the towns and villages of those very same Gazans? Have they forgot that? We are outraged by the complicity of the church. Let it be clear, friends. Silence is complicity. And empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action, all under the banner of complicity. So here is my message. Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October 7th, and the world was silent. Should we be surprised at their silence now? If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. And if we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace.
There you see the Reverend Muntha Isaac from Bethlehem using his Christmas sermon to call out the world, call out the human rights communities for their duplicity and hypocrisy. In his words, they're very direct, but also directly calling out Western Christians that use theology to justify empire. In his words, that's a quote from the speech, stating very clearly that there is something wrong with them if they cannot see the results on the ground of their complicity and their justification for genocide, as you heard there in the speech. Now, why is all this relevant to you listening or watching, wherever you are from, to this Warrior Stream live stream, Warrior Creed live stream? Why is it relevant? Well, let's remember something, that this isn't some war that has nothing to do with us. This isn't some war in a far-off land that we don't have blood on our hands over. Because as this, what you just heard in that sermon, continues to unfold in Gaza and Palestine generally, what we know, as you see from this particular slide, look to the bottom first, December the 22nd, reported by Spectator Index, US President Biden signs a record $886 billion in annual military spending into law. That's why it's relevant to us, because we fund these wars abroad. And above that on the slide, you see again from the Spectator Index, December the 23rd, stating, breaking news from the Spectator Index, Israeli minister says that even if the hostages in Gaza, that is, even if the hostages were returned, the war would not end. So we're in a situation where we're funding these wars abroad, where ethnic cleansing is going on that is using our taxpayer money to fund it. The people we're funding who are engaged in these wars are telling us that even if the aim that they told us that they were fighting for, which is we won't have a ceasefire until all hostages are released, even if that was met, they won't stop the war. They're literally telling us this. Just like last week on the live stream, we explained how Netanyahu's boasting about the fact that historically, he prevented the emergence of a partner for peace. He prevented the rise of a Palestinian state. He's always objected to it, while with the other side of his mouth speaking to Western media saying there's no partner for peace. The Palestinians don't want peace. They don't want a state. He simultaneously boasts that he doesn't want peace, that he prevented the rise of a partner for peace. He facilitated Hamas. All the receipts for all of these very grave allegations are present for everybody who's been following this live stream, because we write all the receipts up for all our allegations and make them available to you so that you can check for yourselves. We don't want blind followers. We don't want you just to believe us. But here we have a situation where they're now telling us that even if what we were led to believe was the aim, that they release, or that Hamas must release all Israeli hostages, which even there is skewed, mind you, because the last hostage exchange during that ceasefire that was called a pause involved Israel releasing children from Israeli jails. Now, what are children in prison if not hostages? And yet we were again told through a media narrative that only Hamas has hostages. And again, that's a skewed perspective. But even if that aim was met and Hamas released all these hostages, we're now being told by the Israeli side that that would not end the war. They would carry on regardless. And that war that they intend to carry on regardless is because the aim has never been to release the hostages. The aim has been to recolonize Gaza, to redominate the Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and reimpose Israeli hegemony over Gaza and expel the Palestinian population through a program of population displacement. That's why we ethnically cleanse the land and dispel them, force them into the desert in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. That's the plan. It's why the Israelis recently issued a warning to the Egyptians that we are coming and we're setting up our military at the border, that was known as the Rafah crossing, the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. And you better be prepared, the Israelis are saying, because we're to the Egyptians, we're coming there regardless. Why are they going there? Because their aim is to control that border crossing, expel the Gazans into the Sinai desert on Egypt's side of the border. And then they're saying, let Egypt deal with them. It is beyond the point where we need to explain how this is textbook ethnic cleansing and population displacement. But that's what's going on. And it's why they're telling us now that even if Hamas were to release the hostages, this will not stop the war. And all of that is why it's relevant to us, because our money, whether in the UK or in the US or other Western countries that back Netanyahu's actions, is funding that war. We continue to send moral, diplomatic, and financial state aid to Israel so that this may continue, in particular the United States of America, with its military aid budget that you just saw there, funding wars abroad. That's why it's so relevant to us, because we, as our societies, are complicit in what's going on. And you heard there that the Reverend Munta Isaac was mentioning how all of the lives lost and the tragedy of the world needing to pay attention. Compare that to Netanyahu's Christmas message, which we're now going to play for you. And before we do, just note the tone of arrogance in the voice that you hear as Netanyahu speaks and addresses the world and makes certain demands from what he expects in terms of support for the world. And keep in mind something, the war propaganda pushed out by Netanyahu wing Zionists from the initiation of this conflict has always been to present this war as a conflict between uncivilized barbarians and the entire Western civilization represented by Israel on the other side. That has been their narrative about this war, that on one end, the Palestinians represent uncivilized, bloodthirsty, murdering barbarians, and on the other end, Israel represents the pinnacle or the front line of defense for Western civilization. That's how Netanyahu continues to try and frame this war. But you just heard Reverend Dr. Munta Isaac from a church in Bethlehem, from the birthplace of Yeshua, of Isa al-Islam, Jesus, a Palestinian Christian, appealing to the world's humanity. That doesn't suit the framing that Netanyahu wants the world to adopt, that this is a struggle between the defenders in the front lines of Western civilization and terrorist barbarians. And we suggest to you, that's why the news of Christmas being cancelled for the first time in history in Bethlehem isn't as widespread as we would expect it to be, because it doesn't suit that framing, the framing that actually these are just terrorist, bloodthirsty barbarians on the other side that we have no choice but to defeat. It is an inconvenient fact that there are Palestinian Christians. It is an inconvenient fact that these Palestinian Christians exist in that land because all the way up until today, throughout the entire period of history while Muslims have been in that land, all the way through the Ottoman period, up until the British Mandate period and then the creation of Israel, that land allowed for Jews and Christians to live. And that's why till this day you can go to Jerusalem, as I have, and retrace the steps that Christians believe are what known as the stations of Jesus on the cross. It's all there preserved still. It's why Muslims are raised with the story of the second caliph of Islam, the companion of the Prophet Muhammad, Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anh, when he entered Jerusalem, refusing to pray in a church, not for any disdain held towards the Christians in that church. On the contrary, it's part of our tradition. We have been raised with this story that the second caliph, the companion of the Prophet Muhammad, one of his disciples, refused to pray in the church with the following words: if I pray in that church, it will be used as an excuse by Muslims in the future to convert that church into a mosque. And I'd rather not provide that pretext for Muslims to convert that church into a mosque. So I won't pray inside it. I'll pray on the steps of the church instead. Till this day, you can see a mosque in that spot called Masjid Umar, the Mosque of Umar, where he prayed, which is separate to the church next door. The church has been preserved. These are just two examples, the Stations of the Cross and this example of Masjid Umar, among many. Of course, Bethlehem being preserved is another. That's one city I haven't visited, but my wife has. And Bethlehem being preserved in the way it is, with all of the Christian relics there, the third example, that Christian presence in Palestine was preserved by Palestinian Muslims, who are the majority, precisely because they are not the framing that Netanyahu wants us to believe, and that is that this is some form of war between the civilized West, represented by Israel, and the barbarian terrorists. But nevertheless, that's the framing he continues to try and sell to the world. And here his, for me, it strikes me as a very arrogant Christmas address to the world from Netanyahu.
Merry Christmas. Christmas is supposed to be a time of goodwill to all men and peace on earth. Well, we don't have peace on earth, not on our part anyway, and we certainly don't see goodwill to all men. We're facing monsters. Monsters who murdered children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children, who raped and beheaded women, who burnt babies alive, who took babies hostages. This is a battle not only of Israel against these barbarians, it's a battle of civilization against barbarism. And I know in this that we have your support. I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank you for your prayers. And I want to assure you that as we stand together, we will also prevail. We shall win this war and secure our common values and our common future. Thank you.
So you heard it there yourselves. He's used the very word, civilization against barbarism. It's unbelievable that he thinks he can still get away with selling that lie to the world. But you all, at least, have just heard Dr. Muntar Isaac from the church in Bethlehem. It's incredibly difficult for people to try and label that barbarian tag on a man of God like that. And yet that's what Netanyahu's trying to do. Despite his efforts, the Palestinian Christians continue to resist alongside their Palestinian Muslim brethren. And they refuse the framing that Netanyahu seeks to impose upon them, that they are all barbarians and he represents civilization. And it's not going too well for Netanyahu. Some of you may remember that we continue to remind all of that poll from the beginning of this conflict that Times of London reported that a whopping 94% of Israelis, here is the poll from the Times of London. I'll read it directly from the article. This is a quote. Another poll found that 94% of Israelis believe the government was to blame for the war. The government was to blame for the war. And 59% of them did not have any faith in its ability to lead the country. So that's how it began for Netanyahu. How is it going now? Well, you heard that speech, and we'd suggest to you that that's actually him, Netanyahu, showing signs of continued desperation, because the Times of London again reports the following from the news articles just from yesterday and the day before, and it's the same story. This is an article from the Times of London, a new article. It's headlined, Benjamin Netanyahu's next battle is to save his political skin. The subheading, with his allies falling away, his war cabinet in turmoil, and Hamas still a threat, the beleaguered Israeli prime minister is maneuvering to shore his own political future and legacy. And in that article is the following quote. And it states, in nearly every poll, you can see there from the 24th of December, this Christmas Eve, it's a new article. It states, in nearly every poll conducted since the war began, an overwhelming majority of the Israeli public has responded that they see Netanyahu as responsible and believe he should resign. A clear majority of Israelis also want early elections. Let me read that again for you. The key line there. An overwhelming majority of the Israeli public has responded that they see Netanyahu as responsible for this war. It hasn't changed. We showed you that article from the beginning of the conflict in the Times. This is something from the 24th, and the situation remains the same. Why do the Israeli public hold Netanyahu responsible for this war? Because as we've tried to demonstrate through multiple Warrior Creed live streams up until now, and you can see all the receipts in Radical Media, maajid.nawaz.substack.com, that the Israeli public is awake to the idea that Netanyahu and his Likudniks, the Netanyahu wing Zionists, facilitated October the 7th in order to use that as a pretext for the invasion. Netanyahu needs war to stay in power, and he needs an expansionist war in particular to continue justifying his presence. The fact that the CCTV footage from the Gaza border with Israel on October the 7th, the Israeli-owned CCTV footage disappeared, and as we said on this live stream, was Epsteined, should show you all you need to know about why the Israeli public is blaming Netanyahu. They believe that the 7-hour response time that it took for the IDF to respond to the October the 7th attacks could not have been possible if not a stand-down order given to the IDF. In other words, the IDF were told to stand down while that attack happened, which is why it took them 7 hours to respond. So the Israeli public appears, as the Times of London at least is reporting, the Israeli public appears awake to the fact that this entire conflict, the responsibility for this conflict, falls squarely on the shoulders of Netanyahu. So no matter what you heard there in his arrogant Christmas address to the world, talking about saving civilization from barbarians, the Israeli public themselves aren't buying it. The danger, of course, like all expat communities, is our Jewish cousins and brethren in Western countries buying the media narrative from Netanyahu and being disconnected from the narrative of their own fellow Israeli public. Now, that's a phenomenon that happens, Usman, with all expat communities. Of course, Muslims in Britain are more Muslim than Muslims in the Middle East with their ignorance, both in terms of their tradition, they're not having the access to their living teachers. And of course, we see that play out in our media, which suits the dialectic as well. That's what is going on here. But we urge our listeners on all sides to understand that even the Israeli public is awake to the deception and lies being peddled by Netanyahu to continue this war. And that's why the writing, we believe, is on the wall for him, despite all the suffering and death on the side of the Gazans and the Palestinians generally. The writing is on the wall for Netanyahu. Now, another example of that is that because Ansar Allah, colloquially known as the Houthis, after the name of their leader, al-Houthi, but the Ansar Allah in Yemen, because they have been blockading the Red Sea, where Yemen, it sits at the edge of the Arabian Peninsula at the entry point of the Red Sea. And the Ansar Allah, the Yemeni, the sort of western and southwestern part of the Yemeni government post-Civil War, they've been blockading that. The Israelis asked for the Americans to send in Navy ships to fight Ansar Allah, which would have sparked a wider war in the region against Iran, and then obviously China and Russia would have had something to say about that. And again, as evidence that things aren't going too well for Netanyahu, that Navy force that Biden actually approved to be dispatched has faced multiple problems. And here's an example of it. It's being reported, according to Iran Observer Online, that the US Navy, I'll read it for you. US Navy says they don't have enough warships to start Operation Prosperity Guardian, that's the name of the operation, against the Houthis, i.e. Ansar Allah in Yemen. According to John Conrad, maritime journalist, the US has built 24 littoral combat ships to be used for combat in coastal areas, but the US has refused to deploy them. The Houthis' anti-ship ballistic missiles and drones are a concern for the US. So the coalition that they try to muster up to go and attack Yemen again and spark another war, perhaps regional war with Iran, is already falling apart. The UK media has also reported on this. Here's a headline from the Express newspaper in the UK by Charlie Bradley, dated 23rd of December 2023. Read the headline. Joe Biden he's been warned that no one takes him seriously as the EU brutally snubs the US. Subheading, France, Spain, and Italy have all announced their withdrawal from the US command structure for Operation Prosperity Guardian. And so you can see there that things are continuing to rapidly fall apart for Netanyahu. The window between fake news and reality, if you look at COVID, took 3 years, as we've said before on this live stream. If you look at Ukraine, it took roughly a year and a half before things started falling apart. With the war and conflict now in Gaza, it's almost instant. It went from being a month to now weeks. Everything they say now is rapidly, their narratives are collapsing around them as they no longer contain the narrative. They can no longer control the narrative, and the framing that people like Netanyahu seek to erect, that there's somehow a war between Western civilization and barbarians, is being ridiculed around the world to such an extent that even Usman, Piers Morgan has succumbed to having to admit that the situation now is beyond defense. Piers Morgan recently, since our last live stream at least, has performed a complete U-turn on Israel. And as we've been saying since there, you can see at the bottom of this slide, October the 27th, one of my posts, Netanyahu is about to overplay his hand tonight. And that's when he first began the bombing campaign. And so far, it looks like that's what's going on, despite the carnage and the death and destruction. Netanyahu, as we said, when we played Lloyd Austin's, US Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin's views on this show, that yes, he may win tactically, but he will lose strategically. And this is what we're continuing to witness, more and more of that strategic defeat. You saw there with Operation Prosperity Guardian, the US Navy losing all its allies in its attempt to support Israel by going to attack Yemen. No one stood with them. No one wants this war. And now even Piers Morgan has come out with the following. Have a listen to this.
Throughout the long and deadly history of Israel's wars with Palestine, it's usually fallen to Israel's friends to tell them when it's time to stop. That time may be fast approaching again, even as Israel insists it needs more time to eradicate Hamas. It can only have itself to blame. This weekend, the IDF admitted to killing 3 of its own hostages in Gaza. The men were waving a white flag of surrender. They'd used scraps of food to scrawl SOS, desperately pleading for help. Regardless of whether they were Israeli or Palestinian, there was no justification under international law for killing them. It's a clear breach of the rules of engagement. What does that tragedy tell us about the way Israeli soldiers are treating Palestinian civilians? How seriously should we now take Israel's insistence it's doing everything it can to keep innocent people alive? In a separate incident, 2 innocent women were reportedly shot dead by sniper fire at a Catholic church in Gaza. One of them was leaving the church shelter to go to the toilet. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the Archbishop of Westminster, one of Britain's most senior spiritual leaders, was scathing.
It's certainly a cold-blooded killing.
The Israeli Defense Force says it didn't happen, wasn't there?
Well, I think that's hard to believe, frankly, because the people in Gaza and the Cardinal Archbishop of Jerusalem, they're not given to tell lies.
So you don't believe the Israeli Defense Force?
No, I don't.
Well, the Pope went even further. He said that what Israel's doing in Gaza now constitutes terrorism.
Unarmed civilians are being bombed and shot at, and this has even happened inside the Holy Family Parish complex, where there are no terrorists but families, children, and sick people with disabilities, nuns. Some say it's terrorism, it's war. Yes, it is war, it is terrorism.
The British government is shifting its position too. Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron, in a joint statement with his German counterpart, said he backs a sustainable ceasefire and said that too many civilians are being killed. Ben Wallace, the influential former Defence Secretary, said if Benjamin Netanyahu thinks a killing rage will rectify matters, then he's very wrong. His methods will not solve the problem. In fact, I believe his tactics will fuel the conflict for another 50 years. His actions are radicalizing Muslim youth across the globe. I think he's right. All this after President Biden accused Israel of indiscriminate bombing, the starkest warning yet that America's backing is not unconditional. Well, news reports about the war in Gaza today will state that 18,000 Palestinians have been killed so far, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And the key point about that often quoted sentence is not the debate about whether Hamas exaggerates those figures, is that Hamas is still in charge and able to release them as official numbers. After 2 months of war, endless atrocities, and the full might of Israel's army unleashed on this tiny strip of land, the very people they're supposed to be eradicating are still firmly in power. Only about 20% of Hamas terrorists so far, even if you accept IDF figures on this, have been killed. 80% remain alive and fighting. Well, most civilized countries and decent people back Israel's fundamental right to exist and indeed its duty to defend itself. But the war is now starting to look like more like retribution than strategy. That suspicion is fueled by hardliners in Netanyahu's government and by Israeli commentators making appalling remarks like this. I support the war crimes. He laughs, as the other presenters laugh as well. Well, the rest of the world does not support war crimes. And if Israel does have a plan and proof that it's working, it needs to start showing the evidence of that plan very soon.
As you can see there, even Piers Morgan performing a huge U-turn. Perhaps, Usman, we should ask him, after hearing that report, whether he condemns Hamas.
Exactly.
As he's been taken to do with those that appeared on his show. Now, in conclusion, what I'd like to do is just say, as it's clear, for me at least, that the Netanyahu wing Zionists, the Likudniks, they're losing the narrative badly. And what will they do? Well, we know that, of course, often what happens in situations like this is that they need war to survive. And they've been trying to provoke war, such as with Operation Prosperity Guardian, the one that we're sending the US Navy warships to fight Ansar Allah in Yemen. That failed, but they will continue to seek to provoke war. And one tactic that they can adopt in 2024, we've been warning of from last week's live stream, the week before, and that is a huge, world-changing false flag black swan event. And as you know, Usman, we've been warning of that on this show. Well, now it's hit corporatist media. Have a listen to CBS News' Catherine Herridge warning of precisely this. But before I show the clip, I'd like to say that we believe this is Catherine Herridge and what she's engaging with CBS airing this. This is their attempt, the globalist attempt to push out predictive programming so that we are all prepared for this black swan event that they want us to believe, as you're going to hear in the clip, is Iran and China and Russia would be responsible for. Again, Russia, when in reality, this predictive programming has been placed in the media so that we accept the explanation when this black swan event happens. But the truth is, this will most likely be a globalist false flag event used as a pretext to justify a totalitarian power grab, as COVID was used as the pretext in the West, so as to preserve their power because they know they're losing badly. Have a listen to this clip.
Concern that 2024 may be the year of a black swan event. This is a national security event with high impact that's very hard to predict. There are a number of concerns that I have that factor into that. Not only this sort of enduring heightened threat level that we're facing, the wars in Israel, also Ukraine. And we're so divided in this country in ways that we haven't seen before. And I think that just creates fertile ground for our adversaries like North Korea, China, and Iran. And that's what concerns me most. Well, mine's a little dark.
Well, there you have it. And the words, it's a little dark. Catherine Herridge saying this is what they are predicting for 2024. Of course, with raising public awareness around the fact this black swan event, if it does happen in 24 or now, anytime now, would be a false flag event. The public has now ample evidence to see how this works, from the so-called COVID emergency and how they used that to try and bring in vaccine passports and the surveillance state, and all the way through to and digital ID. And of course, all the way back to the Iraq war. And these efforts have always sought to use things like 9/11 to invade two countries. This is the pattern now. We should be able to see it, that these people in power, the globalists, seek to exploit crises, no matter who's been behind them, in order to further the aims of their globalist surveillance state. And it's precisely that we warned of in the now famous, well-known appearance on Rogan at the end of Jan 2022, beginning of Feb 2022, stating what they want to do is provoke, through a black swan event, a major world catastrophe, provoke a global civil war between and among nations, but a population-led civil war, so that they can use that as a pretext for government power. And it's no coincidence that the President Obama produced show the day after on Netflix is a fictionalized account of precisely that, a global power outage, which leads to utter chaos and the breakdown of law and order around the world. This is their predictive programming. But if we're aware of it, if we are all and able to make others aware of it, that is our best weapon of defense in making sure that we don't fall for those traps yet again. Osman, over to you.
Okay, first off, the term she's using, black swan event. Yeah, COVID was a black swan event, 9/11. So black swan event refers to the idea of the determined reality that you think you're moving toward. Yeah, and something coming in, the black swan being something that happens that you weren't expecting, that changes the direction of that determined linear movement, because that's how you perceive reality works for you. You know, hence you go to school, you go to college, you go to university, you get a job, and if you go to university, you get your qualifications, but you come out and you can't get your job because AI has taken over. That's a black swan event. That's something you weren't expecting to happen. So the black swan is something that isn't expected. So that to understand what a black swan means, because
she's predicting it, which means she's expecting it.
Yeah, well, exactly. The point is with this that I don't want to say it's not my term, but I'm not saying that I introduced it into the vernacular of counterterrorism, but I think about a decade ago we introduced it, Maajid, in the training, the black swan event. But anyway, let's get to the subject, the very important subject that's in front of us, and to learn from this and to understand what it is that's going on. Because one of the things that's always talked about is history is cyclical. Yep. So if you're seeing something happen right now, did it happen before? Yeah, this accusation of barbarism and the justification of mass murder through the dehumanization of, and we can use it, and we can echo this, the dehumanization of what at first seemed Muslims as a very simple generalization of saying, okay, here's these Palestinians. At their core, their ideology is rotten. At the core, the ideology is barbaric. Hence, yeah, we understand why the killing of children can disturb you, but these aren't the same as your children. These are Palestinian children that could grow up to be terrorists. Remember, they're being educated as terrorists in Gaza, in Palestine. They hate the Jews. They hate our way of life. Yeah, echoing George Bush Jr.'s you're with us or you're against us. They hate our freedom after 9/11. A very simple, generalized understanding, but that's not the cyclical example I'm giving. The example I'm giving here is the Council of Clermont, where Pope Urban II got the Roman, at that time, which would be the Roman Catholic wing. So we had the church split into two. So you had Byzantine, which was the Eastern Orthodox, and you had the Western Roman Empire. And Pope Urban after a lot of other movements that were a lot of other moves that were made within to create a very distinct identity with the Western Roman Catholic Church, had the call for the crusade to the Holy Land to liberate it from the barbarians. Now, the point is with this, that when that first crusade happened, they didn't just kill the Muslims, because that's justifiable, because the Muslims are, because we're all innately barbaric and are moving with some devilish, demonic possession. But they killed the Eastern Orthodox Christians and the Jews as well, to the point where the blood, it said, was up to the knees of the horses. Yeah. Now, the point is with this, the justification given then was that there was this culling of evil. Yeah. And the justification given then, even for the kill of bundling the Orthodox Christians in with the other, was that they were part of the other. They were part of the East. They were part of the Byzantine Church. Yeah. Now, if I was a conspiracy theorist, and which I'm not, but if you look at the history of what's been going on in Palestine, what you see is Israel. I get the maps mixed up. I was looking at the map from 1940s. That's a revised. Yeah, get back to modern day. Modern. When you look at what's been going on in Israel, you start seeing that this hasn't been as simple as even Palestinian Christians. It hasn't been that simple. It's been Armenian Christians who are living within the Christian quarter, who are also leaving their houses and coming back and finding settlers from the Bronx who are like, well, if I don't steal your flat, someone else is going to steal it. Or buying the car park outside the school so no one can so the parents can't bring their kids to the school. The aspect of the othering here is very interesting, because if you look deeper into it, what you see is an othering of the Orthodox Church, which is currently protected by who, Maajid? Where is the Orthodox Church situated?
Well, you've got Greece and Russia.
Thank you. So what you start having with this is, from a perspective of what we call the proxy war of identity, even from that perspective, or the war that happens from the point of view of an us and them perspective. Yeah, a very simple generalization that is known from the movement in that political sphere. So what you've got here is groups that are shown that, well, your identity doesn't fit with, you're not part of the in group. You're not part of that protected group. So what ends up happening is that with Israel right now, there is a very militant Zionist movement, which was using the excuse of fighting the Muslim demons on one side, and the world was able to accept that dehumanization because of the global war on terror, because of the word terrorism holds such sway that it's okay, these are terrorists, and everyone steps back from the table and says, okay, do what you've got to do. Yeah, like literally, these are terrorists, do what you've got to do. Yeah. But now what's happened is the Stanford experiment isn't as simple as it isn't as simple as the prison guards and the prisoners. there's ambiguity now. Well, who are these guys? They haven't got the uniform of the prison guards on them, and they haven't got the orange overalls of the prisoners. Because what starts happening with this is that, first off, we discussed the ambiguity coming from the perspective of the fourth industrial revolution and people getting to see that the people who were speaking from Gaza were speaking the same language as them, were wearing the same clothes as them, that were maybe the in-laws of politicians. Maybe they were doctors who'd gone from the UK or America to go and help. And then on top of that, as soon as you got that humanization going on, the next level of it was children. But the issue with this then becomes, how hard is the heart becoming? Because what we still see with this is a repetition of the same tropes. Yes, Piers Morgan is backpedaling, but we've still got Suella Braverman. You've still got the Daily Mail vilifying individuals that are bringing exactly these subjects up that we've got up on screen here, Maajid. Yeah,
this is even there. I'll just read it quickly. My own reaction to that Morgan video was, the disgusting element here is that approximately 15 to 20,000 dead Palestinians, 50% of them children, didn't seem to move him much. It took the tragic Israeli attack on a Gazan church with the killing of 2 Christians and the IDF's reckless killing of 3 Israeli hostages to move the man. That's to your point.
Yeah, but I just want to ask that question. If we're gonna, I already know the answer to this. You already know the answer to this because we've done these bloody exercises when we've been training the frontline staff. Remember the humanism. You write it up on a wall, and you write it up on the board, and then you start breaking that term down into all of its stratifications to demonstrate to the room, well, actually, it's not humanism. It's group mindset. And when it comes to where that person situates himself, the person sitting in front of you, you can pretty much demonstrate to them that they're not that much different from the Tutsis and the Hutus in that understanding. That if we push them enough and give them enough excuses, they'll grab the baseball bat and kill their neighbors' children, because the facade of humanity is only so thin that what you've actually got is a justification for, you've got the justification for your own comfort through the status quo that's needed for that comfort. Now, remember, we understand in the West that, we've got to, the way we're living, if we haven't got a big carbon footprint, that's because we've evolved to a stage where we haven't got a big carbon footprint. Yeah, we understand that, but we've evolved to that point because we colonized other countries, took their resources, got to a certain stage of where we've got to now. But now, when we're talking about this concept of globalism and trying to demarcate an us and them in the world, and we start realizing that the excuses that we were using previously to say those people are barbarians no longer stand. Remember, MBS right now with Saudi Arabia. He's liberalized that place to the level where you can now go to one of the forbidden cities, which is Medina, where the mosque of the Holy Prophet ﷺ is, and you can go to that forbidden city, what was previously a forbidden city, and go right up to the walls of the mosque as a non-Muslim. He's holding rock concerts up there. boxing shows, everything else. You can't point at the East now and say these are backwards barbarians. What you now get is you've got your holiday destination or even your preferred place of residence once you get the capability to actually move out there. Yep. It's no longer black and white. The simplicity of generalization no longer exists, except where? Except where, Maajid? Israel. The apartheid state. The whole point of apartheid is black and white. There's no ambiguity. And the problem is, if there was a polite facade, we've got a term in Islam called dajjala, where you take the coal and you cover it with gold, and then I hand it to you as a nugget of gold, and you look at it. But then if you peel the layer of gold away, you suddenly realize I've actually just given you coal. It's worthless. It's one of the root word. It's the root word for the term dajjal. But the dajjala that was there before, the covering, the veil, which referred to also that covering of the mange on the camel, Maajid, with the tar. That covering's come off now. What you get to see is, actually, it's not just us barbaric Muslims who are sacrificing. I've yet to see it, but I think it's out there. So sacrificing children and doing whatever we're doing, worshipping devils, and it's not just us. It's the Christians as well. And the problem, once you get to that level of ambiguity, once your Stanford experiment starts to collapse, the guards and the prisoners, they can no longer hate each other. Because remember, it needed the clear lines before. Absolute evil. The way evil works is if evil's revealed on one side, then it really does put the responsibility of evil on those people, on whoever is committing that evil. And the question mark with this is, even if you go to the most extreme amount of people that were supposedly killed, I remember the number was 1,400, and now it's gone down to, I don't know, was it 1,000 or 800 or something? Another number's it's gone down quite dramatically for what happened on October the 7th, even though we don't validate this at all. Remember, guys, we're the ones that have been on the front line of tackling terrorism, and a lot worse terrorism than this. We're talking about double-digit figures when we talk about the thousands. I'm talking about tens of thousands of people when we were dealing with ISIS and Al Qaeda and all of that. We're talking about that level. But the point being with this, that if that was 800, 1,000, 1,400 people, 9,000 children was at one point. What children?
Yeah.
What is it like? I reverse it around and I turn it around and say to you, okay, give me 10,000 adults. Does that compare to 5,000 children? Does that make sense? Because the level of innocence I'm talking about the point where when you talk about children, you're talking about the most extreme example of why. Because at least with an adult, you can come from your own subjective relativity and start projecting whatever type of nonsense you want on that other adult. They're like this, they're like that, they come from this background. You can a leopard can't change its spots. But when you get to children, you get to just willful killing, don't you? You're just killing for the sake of it. It is genocide. It is ethnic cleansing. And the thing that we've got now with this is the other point that we've made, Maajid, that the democratization of war, where the Houthis have been taking out, have put to a stop some of the most advanced army, some of the tools of the most advanced army with what? With drones, which is what happened in the early part of the war in Ukraine when Russia came in. That was before Russia got its act together. Not that we're not supporting Russia in ways, but I'm just saying in its strategy in Ukraine. But point being, with the Houthis, they've been able to put a standstill to organized armies through the availability of this new weaponry that's around. Do you see what I'm talking about with the democratization of weaponry? This is why we're moving away from the nation state to the private army now. That's why was it Blackwater? I think it was, not Black Rock, but was it Blackwater? Was the mercenary group. So what ends up happening now is when you start looking internationally, you start seeing a lot of these private armies now, and these private armies themselves, because of the accessibility of very effective weaponry, quite cheap, from quite cheap perspective. What we end up with now is we've ended up with the democratization of warfare. So the idea that if the Houthis can get drones and start shutting down shipping lanes that are worth billions, what it actually starts showing you is why we're moving towards this globalized state where the nation theater play is actually a facade that we're watching. Remember, Maajid, anyone that knows anything, if they're looking at the US and thinking that Biden and the cross-dressing general, whose name I can't remember, you remember there was a cross-dressing general, and that when you've got that playing out in front of you, that's a signal that's being sent to anyone with critical thinking to say, are you serious? Yeah, so if you're sitting at the table that matters, someone's going to stop eating their chicken wing and look at you and go, you didn't figure that out. Yeah. And not that I'm saying that we've had people stop eating their chicken wing and say you haven't figured that out, but there's been those conversations, Maajid. Was that, haven't you figured that out yet? That what we've got going on right now is corporate interest, and that's where exactly the point that William, I do not want to try and pronounce his second name. Darren. I love the guy's writing anyway, but I'm not going to. So
historian,
William Darren. The point that he made, that what we're seeing right now are corporate shills. Yeah, well, you're watching a billionaire who's on his student placement as the prime minister of a country, literally like a student who's on his placement, gets to put it on his CV and go, so what have you done? Oh, I was a prime minister of this, and then now I'm the CEO of this. Do you see? He's got his little placement over here. You've got Biden gets to do his little stint in the White House with a trans general in place. But where are the actual decisions being made? And that's the question mark with this, because the issue with this, the thing that we're going to see as we move forward now is does the humanitarian aspect kick in, and do we see more resolve from in this fourth industrial revolution of people coming forward and saying, not in my name, things need to change? But if that's where we're going to, that's dangerous from the globalist perspective, Maajid, because remember, the COVID experiment was a success, 67% of humanity behind closed doors. The next part of this experiment is, do they step out and do they say, okay, not in our name, or do they step back because they're exhausted from that adrenal sensational perspective? Remember, the adrenal sensational perspective. No, not in my name. Oh, okay, I feel tired. I'm gonna go to bed now. Because you've had the hit, you've masturbated, now you're going to bed, and that's the problem. There's no discipline for the revolution. There's no understanding that this reality is in the olden days. Part of the reason that people took over the walls and went over the walls and did all of that, Margie, was because they weren't masturbating. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
it wasn't the adrenal rush. It wasn't the dopamine dump. And yeah, I'm purposely being crude because what we're talking about here is the Lutheran priest. I've forgotten his
Munther Isaac, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac.
The good Reverend said that you're not are you recognizing our humanity? Are we the wrong color? Because what you've got is someone coming from a traditional perspective. The world that he's living within is still a world of oneness, of enlightenment, of humanity around him. And you can see that because the language he's using, the fact that he's coming out and courageously speaking. Because you have to think to yourself, Maajid, that Christmas isn't happening in Bethlehem. Christmas isn't happening in Bethlehem. This isn't. We're living in a time right now that is horrific. I sit here and
especially in history.
Sorry, Maajid?
For the first time in history, Christmas
is first time in history. First time in history. And the problem is with this that we've got a complete reshuffling of the value system. And what I mean by complete reshuffling of it is that previously there was a bit of tact and they were inventive in the way that the sophistry was presented. So at a certain level, if you went to the man in the pub and sat down with him, or the man in the working club, or the man in the church or the mosque, he was convinced of what the powers that be were doing. He was convinced that what they were doing was morally correct. And you would have to go and have a discussion with him and build up and dismantle an argument. Yeah. But now what's happening is that what's presented to the man on the ground is, okay, if you want to be comfortable in your status quo, this is what your status quo costs. This is what it costs for you. Yeah, we got to kill those people, we're going to kill their kids. Yeah, okay. What's the argument? Oh, they are, they're literally born evil. Do you understand the argument? They're literally born evil. Yeah, even Piers Morgan sitting there. Well, how do you kill Hamas unless it's by killing? Remember when it started? 2,000 children, 3,000 children, 9,000 children. Well, but we have to kill them. We have to kill Hamas. And then when you had Palestinians coming on, remember, we don't even recognize the term Palestinian. We've never recognized that term because it's always been, for us, the circle of influence, circle of concern. Whether you wanted to go at it from perspective of, what was it, brother Muslims? Was it brother Eastern people? Was it brother? Like I'd consider the Reverend a brother. And I'd consider that because he's coming from the perspective of goodness, a collective goodness. And remember what Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayer said? He said, what's happening in the Middle East is sectarian violence, not religious, sectarian, as in Christian, Muslim, Jew, sectarian, Abraham, the children, the faith of Abraham, and it's sectarian. It's a sectarian argument, not religions. That's what Abdullah bin Bayer talked about. But my point with this is that when you're looking at this, when we've been looking at this thing, Maajid, it's like you've had Palestinians come on with on all of the different forms of media and say, okay, here's my brother, my mother, my this. They've all been killed, and then the person turns around and they're like, well, do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
And
go on. Conclude your thought.
The problem with this is, Maajid, that there's not even a level of that. Previously, the same sophistry that's used to garner your empathy for what I'm going. So as the group that's doing getting rid of the terrorists, I'm garnering your empathy. You have to say, Joe, this is what I'm going through, But then when I come to you for empathy, you have nothing. You don't recognize my because you have to recognize my humanity to have empathy. Does that make sense, Maajid? And there's a problem here. Because what we've got with this is there's a scary thing that's going on with this, which is a level of generalization and dehumanization that, unless it's tackled, if we keep moving down this trajectory, where does it take us?
On the note of, it's been an hour and a half, on the note of recognizing humanity, I'm going to leave us with a clip. This is a clip of a Palestinian girl. It's in Arabic with subtitles. For those on the podcast, I'll then read what she says. But those, and if you need to watch it for yourselves, you can go to maajidnawaz.substack.com and watch the clip for yourselves. But it's to leave on this note of common humanity. It is incredibly moving and sad and tragic to watch the defiance of a little girl, Palestinian child, speak up in this way after her house was destroyed. And pay attention, Usman, what you're about to listen to her response among all the bluster and all the resilience, all the courage and all of the determination. Her answer, you'll see when she says what she's going to do. It's tear-jerking. Have a listen.
والعدوين كمان حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل عليكم وراح نعلمكم الأدب زي ما انتوا كنتوا هلا بتخلونا نبرد وتهدموا بيوتنا احنا حنوريكم نحن لن نستسلم ننتصر او نمت او لن نظن انها النهاية سنقابل الجيل القادم والاجيال القادمة تقف معهم بريطانيا وايطاليا تقف معهم قوة الارض نحن يقف معنا الله الجبار الملك القدوس السلام الرحمن المؤمن القوي نحن معنا الله.
لما طلعتي من البيت بتعرفي اشي عن البيت هلا بتعرفي انه اذا موجود او الدمر؟
بعرف انه انقصف وبعرف كمان انه انهدم لانه انا سبت كل العابي هناك وحرجع وحبني خيمة فوق الردم والحجر والرمل حبني اكبر خيمة
The defiance there of that child in response to her home being destroyed, saying very clearly that she will go return to the rubble and the sand and the dirt and build a tent in defiance, and then stand on that rubble in her tent and raise a Palestinian flag. I'm just going to read a translation for those on the podcast who are listening. But just as I do, Osman, just look at her eyes and look at that stare and look at the determination in this child's face as she spoke. And I'll read the translation for those who are listening to the Arabic. Of course, it was incredibly moving, if you understand that Arabic as well, to hear that from the Palestinian child. She begins and says, "Here is my message to Netanyahu and our enemies too. God is sufficient for us, and he's the best disposer of affairs over you. We will teach you manners. Just like you are now making us cold and destroying our homes, we will show you. We will not surrender. We either achieve victory or die. We will not believe this is the end. We will continue with the next generation and generations after. Britain and Italy stand with them. The forces of the world stand with them. We have God Almighty standing with us, the King, the Holy One, the Merciful, the All-Strong. We are with God." And then the journalist asks, "When you left your home, did you know anything about it? Do you know if it is still there or if it was destroyed?" And the child replies, "Yes, I know that it was bombed, and I am certain that it was destroyed because I left all my toys there, and I will return, and I will build a tent over the rubble and stones and sand. I will build the biggest tent and stand in front of the Jews, and like this, raise the Palestinian flag." And I wanted everybody to hear that, because we've been saying for a long time on Warrior Creed that you cannot bomb your way out of an insurgency. And when you're killing 20,000 non-combatant civilians, 50% of whom are children, according to the latest Gaza Health Ministry estimates, which again, even if you want to try and pretend that's an exaggeration, fine, slash it in half all you like. Let's say 10,000 compared to the Israeli figures of October the 7th, 1400. That is, by any definition of international law, a disproportionate response. If you go back and look this up on Wikipedia, it is there preserved for posterity. Many years ago, there was an operation in Gaza, and we led a delegation to the then Foreign Secretary David Miliband. Remember when David Miliband was Foreign Secretary? And we went in and led a delegation and said, this is a disproportionate response. We've always had this view. We've never changed the view. And that is, proportionality is a cornerstone of any response under international law. And it's heartbreaking to see that little child mustering her voice up in that way, raising her voice and saying, I will go and stand on the rubble and build a huge tent in defiance. You cannot bomb your way out of an insurgency. All that you are going to do, her message there was addressed directly to Netanyahu. All this achieves is perpetuates the cycle of violence. It will never remove Hamas from the Gazan or Palestinian population. What it will do, though, instead, is raise a generation of orphaned children, homeless orphaned children. And then when I posted that clip on my social media feed, I asked the question. People underneath, some of them, not everyone, but some were responding, oh, look, they're teaching their children hate. It's unbelievable to respond in that way. Just imagine you're that child. I mean, she looked about 5, 6, 7 years old, who knows? But if you've just had your entire home bombed to rubble, that struck me, that child, she struck me as more composed than I would be in such circumstances. If all she's saying is, I'm going to build a tent in defiance and live in that tent on the rubble of my home, that was composure. I don't know how I would respond in such a situation. It's heartbreaking. And I end on this Boxing Day of Christmas 2023, in which for the first time in history, Christmas was cancelled in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, alayhi salam, with an appeal to people that are watching and listening to this live stream. You know, we all have a choice. We always have a choice. And we've got election year coming up in 2024. And the very least we could do, as Sir Keir Starmer's discovering in his pretense of a Labour Party, the very least we could do is refuse to acquiesce refuse to remain silent, refuse to be complicit, as Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac asked of us, refuse to be complicit with our silence by allowing for our governments in our name to continue rendering thousands upon thousands of Palestinian children, like that girl you just saw, homeless or orphaned, raised with no shepherd to care for them in a brutal and cruel world. It's easy for us on our keyboards to sit in judgment and say, oh, look, she's been indoctrinated with hate. I didn't see any hate in her words. I saw courage and defiance and steadfastness, the likes of which I wish as a child of her age, and composure that I could show if I were faced with such dire situations, such horrific circumstances, and my home being reduced to rubble in that way. So that's how I want to end this live stream. Isman, any last words from you?
People need to understand that every single thing that's happening right now, it's like a stone that's thrown into a river, that the ripple will eventually hit you. There's ramifications for every single thing that happens, especially in the world that we live in right now, where you can watch what's going on and maybe even take glee in it, like the fattened individuals in the middle of Rome, sitting in the Colosseum, watching slaves being fed or watching Christians being fed to lions, which would be an example. You can sit and watch and entertain yourself with it by dehumanizing, but remember, there's ramifications for this. There was a reason that when the Germanic barbarians got into Rome, they massacred. There was that what ends up happening with humanity, and it's quite a horrible thing as well, that hopefully we get the likes of Salahuddin, who said that they're not our teachers, that this isn't, this isn't about an eye for an eye. But the problem is, when you've got generations that are growing up right now, like these kids, Maajid, in Palestine, in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in all of these regions that have been decimated and destroyed with in the geopolitical game. Yeah,
it has consequences.
Yeah, it has consequences, and the problem is that the thing that we've been trying to do over the last 2 decades is go out there and stop that ripple from hitting you. And the problem when you're out there problem solving, and I have to admit, this is if someone wanted to go out and create problems, Maajid, I couldn't have written a better way to do it than this.
Yeah. On that note, we're going to call it for today, but thank you all for your patience and time joining us on Warrior Creed live stream. We'll be back next week for the regular time, 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. EST on Rumble. And those of you who prefer the podcast version, go to Radical Media, which is on majidnawaz.substack.com. And you can get the free written up article, written version of this presentation, or indeed for premium subscribers, gain access to the podcast. Until next time, thank you very much.
To witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.